Tantlinger, and I want to thank Brad so much for inviting me to these spooky readings. I'm very excited. I'm going to read a little bit from my short story Hexenmeister today. Usually I read poetry for these things, so I'm excited to read a short story, at least part of it. And this short story can be found in the charity anthology DIABOLICA AMERICANA, which comes out on Halloween. And it is edited by Keith Anthony Baird, who also made the graphic that you saw at the beginning of this video for the story. He made a lot of really cool graphics for the book, so maybe you've seen those around on Twitter. What you need to know so far, since I'm starting kind of in the middle of the story, is that our main character, Johnny, he lives in central Pennsylvania. This takes place in like the late 1920s. Johnny is a practitioner of a Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic known as the Braucherij, and he is a Braucher. So kind of like a doctor that uses talismans and hexes and charms and things like that is how he views himself. It's a kind of witchcraft, but he needs some help figuring out who is hexing him. So he goes to see the Marietta River Witch, and that is right where our story picks up. The half-hour sprint down to Marietta felt longer as chills took hold of his bones, and the proximity to the Susquehanna River did no favors for one seeking warmth on this night. The home of the River Witch was not hard to spot, a cottage nestled near the riverbank. Darkness covered most other details, but faint candle glow danced from each window of the one-story home, where decaying vines crept from ground to roof. The gentle song of wind chimes from somewhere on the porch played out an eerie melody as Johnny secured his horse nearby and then approached the front door. Two long bones dangled from a string above the door, and the sun-bleached skull of a deer sat on a stool to his left. He kept his gaze away from the skull and reached toward the brass knocker of the dark wooden door. He'd never talked to or even seen the River Witch before. Was she his age, younger, an ancient crone? She could be an animated corpse for all he cared. He wasn't looking to take the woman out to dinner. He just needed to end this curse. He raised a shaking hand to rap against the door. An icy feeling snaked through his spine, a kind of warning that he had no business being here. What did someone like him know about asking a witch for help while the moonlight glowed overhead? A desperate man he knew himself to be, and desperate men made increasingly unwise choices. 2 knocks later, and the door opened into a maw of velvet black, illuminated only by faint candlelight. He called out, unsure of what to name her. Brauchfrau? A chuckle. I am no German, and I am certainly no doctor. Just a witch, then. Something like that. Pale face framed with wild white curls appeared from around the corner. She struck a match to a few more candles and finally a lantern, chasing away some of the room's shadows. Potted plants sat in every corner, and dried flowers hung upside down near her windows. What looked to Johnny like a private apothecary lined the walls near a sparse kitchen. He recognized some of the ingredients. After all, his own work as a Braucher called for certain roots and seeds, for frogs and ashes, for select materials needed for such a fine art of talismans and healing. The art did not often call for blood, but eyeing the scarlet-stained jars on the witch's shelves, he did not think she could say the same. He had a feeling his typical simple charms were not this woman's style. Maps, incantations, and scrawl he couldn't read lay scattered on every flat surface, something far beyond his understanding. What purpose does a man like you have in the hollow? She drifted past him, a scent of lavender perfumed from her skin. The ragged dress she wore flowed around her movements in an ethereal dance. Am I not welcome here? He took his hat off, crumpled it together in his hands out of nerves. She sat down at a circular table, the only surface free of papers. A single white candle stood upright in the middle of the table, where a pointed symbol had been carved. She gestured for him to take the seat across from her. Anyone is welcome here, but to banish what you believe plagues you, well, What a wish that is. Johnny took the seat, mind muddled by her words as he tried to keep up. You know why I'm here. She folded long fingers beneath her chin. I do. Then you must be very powerful. My own power isn't enough to break this hex, ma'am. She cringed. Call me Essie. And your power, she trailed off as glimmering eyes hardened into a cold glare. Stolen power. You do work in the name of a god that's long since abandoned you, a god that will not forgive your path. Heat bloomed against Johnny's cheeks. I'm not a perfect man, but never would I cross that line. I ask God's forgiveness every morning. I am a Braucher, Miss Essie, a healer. To work our power selfishly in the name of ego, that's self-serving, that's darkness, that's where the hexerai originates, the River Witch finished his thoughts, and a small smile formed on lips tinted a dark purple. He held her gaze. Selfishness summons the devil. She laughed, and Johnny didn't know if she was laughing at him, but he couldn't afford to insult her, so he kept quiet. Crumpled his hat up more, sure to leave permanent wrinkles. Can you help me or not? Essie tilted her head, and the laughter faded away. Careful fingers lit the white candle between them, and she reached for his hands. He laid his knuckles on the warmth of her palms, and she closed her eyes. In his house I see a book. In his house I feel evil, she said, voice distant. Whose house? What book? She shushed him, squeezed his hands tightly within her own. Nelson, in the brown house with the red door, not too far from this hollow. How curious. In the book? She paused. Das Kloster, a translation of it, translated by a known antiquarian. Do you know such a book? Johnny hesitated, not wanting to sound so superstitious. The Brauchers, others, have rumored that translation in particular book to be a thing of evil. A thing that goes against our own good word, abuses it. A book of occult, Miss Essie. She cracked an eye open. You fear the occult? That's dark witchcraft. Could get someone in trouble. Essie dropped his hands and blew out the candle, that smirk back in place on her face that seemed both young and ancient at once. Iris as dark as a bog of swamp water contrasted against her pale features. You play at being a magical doctor. Think you understand what it means to be a witch. With this curse over you, you'll never amount to anything. Not as long as a real Hexenmeister like Nelson lives and curses you. What can I do? Take his place. Lead the others. You become the Hexenmeister. Nelson becomes the Hexed. Johnny quieted and mulled those words over. Could he really overpower this slinger of hexes? Take his place? To restore his glory, the trust of townspeople in him as their beloved Braucher? He wanted nothing more. Essie wasn't finished with him. You men, you come here and your power gets celebrated. People seek you out. Your ancestors never knew punishment. Do you know what happened to my ancestors, John? Had he told her his name? He couldn't remember. I know as much about those trials as anyone else, if that's what you mean. Every candle in the cottage burned brighter, as if each flame danced in anger. Yes, that's what I mean. Her tone mocking, but he didn't know what he was supposed to say. You know nothing, she continued, yet here we are. Are you shunned as I am, sir? Do you fear imprisonment or pyres or drowning? He stuttered, shook his head. He even tried to apologize, but she shushed him. A coy leer slunk across her face. That heart of yours, it's almost good, but something has come loose in your mind, and the mask you wear will slip. Right, I'm going to end it there. If you want to find out the rest of what happens, because it only continually escalates from there, make sure you check out Diabolica Americana. Right, have a great rest of your spooky season, everyone. Bye.